Good day, grade 12 learners. Welcome to today's Life Sciences lesson. My name is Vedika Maraj, and this lesson is brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Cybono Discovery Center. Today, we're going to be presenting on the topic, the response to the environment in humans, and the subtopic is the human eye. And I'm together with my co-presenter, Sina. So let's get right into it. Let's start with the examination guideline. The examination guideline, as a reminder to you, it gives you the scope of what you need to know for your final examination. It gives you all the information that you need and in how much detail you need to go on every subtopic. So please make sure that when you are studying for the June examination and for your prelim and your final examination, that you are able to tick every single box on your examination guideline before you write your papers, so that you are fully prepared. So today we are going to be doing the structure and functions of the parts of the human eye using a diagram, binocular vision and its importance, the changes that occur in the human eye for accommodation and pupillary mechanism, and the nature and treatment of the following visual defects: short-sightedness, long-sightedness, astigmatism, and cataracts. So our pre-knowledge for this area, okay, I want us to remember about what we learned in the previous week, which was last week when we did the human nervous system, and we spoke about stimulus, receptors, what else do you remember? Neurons, okay, impulses. We spoke about all of those things in the previous lesson. So today let's think about them before we start with the eye, because remember, the human eye is a sense organ. Okay, and it forms part of the human response to the environment, right? Because our eye is, whatever we see is going to be interpreted by our brain. Okay, and our brain forms part of our central nervous system, right? So this is all part of our pre-knowledge. Now, stimulus, if you remember what a stimulus is, do you remember? It detects change in the environment. And then we have a receptor. The receptor is going to receive the stimulus, and it's going to convert the stimulus into a nerve impulse. And the impulse gets travels or gets transmitted via the neurons, okay? And then they go to the central nervous system. The sensory neuron, to be specific, goes to the central nervous system, which is the cerebrum or the spinal cord. And then we have a motor neuron that takes the impulse away from the central nervous system to the effector organ. But why I want to mention to you now about the cerebrum is because, remember, cerebrum is the part of the brain that is going to interpret the information that has been received or by the neuron. Okay, so I want us to think about all of these as we look at the human eye. So we have our terms, we always say in life sciences, it's very important we have to do our terms. There are many terms, okay? There are many structures in the eye. I couldn't mention all of them here, but they could actually ask you those terms as well. But the main ones I want us to focus on are rods, cones, pupillary mechanism, accommodation, convex, and concave, because these are words that learners often get confused about, and there are also ones that are commonly asked and ones that they need to understand in order to understand everything we're doing with the human eye. Okay, so firstly we have rods. They are receptor cells found in the retina of the eye, which are sensitive to dim light and help to distinguish between black and white. Okay, and then we have cones, which are receptor cells, which are also found in the retina of the eye, and they are sensitive to bright light, and they help to distinguish between different colors. And together these rods and cones are called photoreceptors. Then we have the pupillary mechanism, which is the regulation of the pupil size to control the amount of light entering the eye. Okay, so when it comes to the eye, the stimulus, when it comes to sight rather, the stimulus is light. Okay, so the pupil of the eye is the black hole in the eye that controls the amount of light that is entering the eye. And then we have accommodation. It's the ability of the lens of the eye to alter its shape for clear vision when viewing both near and distant objects. Then we've got convex. It's a shape which curves outwards, thicker in the middle than the edges, and concave, it curves inwards and it's thinner in the middle than the edges. Okay, I know this doesn't make sense right now, but you're going to see when we do the lesson that I'm going to explain all of these terms again. So this is a picture of, or a little GIF of the eye, and you can see there that you see something happening. Okay, you can see there's a round black circle and it's getting smaller and bigger as you're looking at it. I just want to stop here and I want us to just have a look at it and appreciate the human eye. It is such a important part. Okay, it's a sense organ that's so very important. It's beautiful, it looks beautiful. You always hear all these poems and songs and everybody going on about how beautiful eyes are, and they really, really are. And some of them even say they're the windows to our souls. Okay, but now it is so interesting to see, and it's so what I love about the eye is that it's so amazing how it works. We just have light that shines through the pupil of our eye, and then the light gets refracted, right? And then it hits the lens, it gets refracted, and then it focuses on a spot, and then all of a sudden we have an impulse that is formed, and we have this impulse taken to the brain, and then we can interpret what we see. So for me, it's very amazing, right? And you should think so as well. So first we have to look at the external structure of the eye. Very important. You need to know the parts. We need to know the eyelid. The eyelid is this part on top. We have our eyelashes. We have the iris, which is the color part of the eye. We've got the pupil, which is that dark. It's actually just a hole, but it looks black when we are looking at it. And then we've got the sclera, which is the white part of the eyeball. Okay, so the front of the eye is protected by the eyelid, which have eyelashes to stop foreign particles from entering the eye. The colored part of the eye is known as the iris, and the opening in the center of the iris is the pupil, and the sclera is a white outer covering layer. Then we come to the internal structure of the eye. So grade 12s, you need to know how to label the eye, the internal and the external structures of the eye. So you can see all the different parts here. We are going to look at it in more detail when we also do the different functions of the different parts. So I'm going to move on to the next one. Let's start with the first one. The first one is the sclera. So remember we said from the external view, the white part of the eyeball, that is called the sclera. Okay, so when we are looking at the eyeball cut through, then the outer layer is called the sclera. Okay, it is tough, white, inelastic layer that covers the eye towards the posterior. It protects the inner part of the eye and maintains the shape of the eye. Then we've got the choroid, that is the middle layer. Okay, so there are three layers. There's the sclera, the choroid, and the retina. Okay, I'm going to bring them all up now. The sclera is the one that I said is tough, it's white, it's inelastic. The choroid is the middle layer. It's continuous with the ciliary body and the iris. Okay, when we get there, I'll remind you about that to show you where those parts are. And it has dark pigment to absorb light within the eye. And it has blood vessels to provide nutrients and oxygen. Okay, in life sciences or in the human body, whenever we're talking about blood vessels, you must always understand that they provide nutrients and oxygen. Then we've got the retina. The retina is the inner layer of the eye. It contains the eye photoreceptors, which I mentioned to you earlier, the rods and the cones. Remember I told you the rods are there to distinguish between black and white, and the cones are there to distinguish between the bright colors. And then this is the site for which the image is formed, and it helps to convert the light stimuli to impulses. Okay, so very important things that I need you to know about the retina is that it's an inner layer. It has the photoreceptors, and photoreceptors, what do? They receive the stimulus and convert it into an impulse. So that is the part of the eye. The light that comes into the pupil is the stimulus, and when it reaches the retina, stimulus is going to be converted into a nerve impulse. Okay. And this is the site where the image is formed, and then we spoke about the impulse, right? Then we go to the vitreous humor. The vitreous humor is a jelly-like structure. It helps to maintain the shape of the eyeball so that we have this long, roundish, spherical shape, and it plays a minor role in refracting light rays. Then we have the aqueous humor. It contains clear fluid that gives shape to the cornea. It also supplies nutrients and oxygen. So learners always tell me, ma'am, we get confused between aqueous humor and vitreous humor. So the way I remember it is, if we have to look at the eye, which is in this position, then the letter A comes before the letter V. Okay, so this one is aqueous humor, which comes first, and this one is vitreous humor that comes second after A in the alphabet. Then we have the outer layer, the front part of the eye, the covering on the front part. This is the curved part of the eyeball, rather, is called the cornea. It is transparent. What does transparent mean, grade 12? It means it is see-through, okay, like glass. And it is curved on the front part of the eye, and it allows light to enter the eye. It refracts the light rays which enter the eye. So remember I told you that light will come. So when light hits the eye, it's first going to there's going to be a cornea, right? Okay. And then it's going to refract the light onto the lens, and the lens is going to further refract the light. Then the vitreous humor is going to have also have a bit of refraction, and all of this refraction is allowing the light to be focused onto the retina. So this refraction is actually the bending of light. Right, let's look at some other structures. We still have quite a few to go through. We've got the iris. The iris is the colored portion, okay? And then we've got, it's a pigmented muscular structure. It consists of circular muscles and radial muscles, and they regulate the amount of light entering the eye. Then we've got the pupil. Is the opening in the iris, allows the light to enter the inner eye. We have the ciliary body and the suspensory ligaments. The ciliary body contains the ciliary muscles, which enables the lens to change its shape, and the suspensory ligaments attaches the lens to the ciliary body, which helps to alter the shape of the lens. Now, what I want to show you is that this is the part where they said, remember they said that the choroid, so this is the choroid, right, the middle layer, it's continuous with the ciliary body, and the iris. Can you see how it's there? Okay, so that's what they mean by that. Now, what I want you to know is these three, the iris, the pupil, the suspensory ligaments, and the ciliary body. All of these are important for a process that we are going to learn about, which is called the pupillary mechanism. So you must remember the pupillary mechanism has got to do with the pupil, the iris. Remember I told you the iris controls the pupil size, and then the ciliary body and the suspensory, the pupil, I was supposed to stop there. The pupil and the iris are forming part of the pupillary mechanism, and then the lens and the ciliary body. So we've got the lens plus the ciliary body plus the suspensory ligaments. These are what are going to work to in the process. They're going to work together to carry out the process of accommodation. Accommodation is when we are being able to see near or distant objects. So the lens is elastic, it is transparent, it is biconvex, and it refracts light and focuses it to the retina. Okay, so when we're talking about biconvex, we are talking about this shape. Okay, I want you to have a look at the shape. So bi means two, and convex is this shape. Okay, remember I explained it to you being thicker in the middle and thinner towards the ends. Okay, so bi meaning two. So we have two of these shapes that are together. This is what the lens looks like. The lens shape is biconvex. Okay, it can become more convex and it become less convex. It can become more convex, it can become less convex. Okay, it does not become convex because it's already that shape. Okay, and then like I said, it is going to now this shape, that's why it's elastic, that's why it's allows to make those shapes, because it's elastic. But why I'm spending a lot of time on this grade 12s is because if you don't understand where the lens is in the eye and what's the function of the lens in all of these different parts, you are not going to understand pupillary mechanism, and you are not going to understand accommodation. So it's very important that you know how to label these diagrams and you know the functions. So if you look at this lens, you can see there, can you see here, it's attached, exactly what I explained, and then it's also attached to the suspensory ligaments. Okay, and then we have the ciliary body. The ciliary muscles is going to enable the lens to change the shape. So the ciliary body is going to carry out a function, and that is going to cause the suspensory ligaments to either slacken or become taut, and that's what's going to cause the lens to change shape. Then we've got the blind spot. There are no photoreceptors there, and there's no vision that can take place. So there's no photoreceptors here, which means that there is no vision that takes place there. Okay, and then we have the optic nerve. It carries the impulse from the retinas to the cerebrum, and then we've got the yellow spot, which has only cones, and it's a site for clear vision. Okay, so when it's going to reach that point, that is the site of clear vision, and then we're going to have the stimulus converted into a nerve impulse, and that impulse is going to be taken via the optic nerve to the cerebrum. Why the cerebrum? Because remember, the cerebrum is the one that interprets the information from our sense organs. Okay, so now we also need to understand binocular vision. So now we understand the external and the internal structures of the eye, and now we need to look at binocular vision. It refers to the ability to focus on an object with both eyes, creating a single image. So this basically is saying that we've got two eyes, right? Okay, but when we see, if I'm focusing on one object, I'm focusing on this stylus, then I'm only looking at one. Even though I have two eyes, I'm seeing one because there is only one, right? So it's that ability for us to focus on this with both eyes, and even though we have two eyes, we are able to create an image, one image. Our eyes are placed in some distance apart, creating the ability to observe two separate images. Since each eye forms an image, the two images are combined to form a three-dimensional stereoscopic presentation of the object. Okay, so what they're saying is, let's look at the picture. This is the original object. Our left eye is able to see it in a specific view, and our right eye is in another view. Both views are merged in the brain to form a single image. How amazing is that? And what is the significance of this? Why do we need to have the stereoscopic binocular vision? It's so that we have depth of perception. It enables us to walk up and down stairs. Okay, imagine if we couldn't have depth perception and we had to walk upstairs. That would be really, really difficult, because we won't be able to judge how high the step is, okay, or how low the step is. It gives a wider field of view. It gives precise depth perception, which is size and distance. So when we are crossing the road, we can be able to tell how far a car is from us or an object. Binocular vision helps with performance skills such as catching, grasping, and locomotion. Okay, so this binocular vision really helps us to be the organisms that we are. Right, now we're moving on to accommodation. Now I want to remind you, accommodation is the focusing of light on the retina, but it enables us to see objects that are near and objects that are far away. So I want to remind you, what are the different parts that are involved here? It's the ciliary body, which includes the ciliary muscle, the suspensory ligament, and the lens. Okay, so we're going to talk about how all of those work together in order to bring about distant vision and near vision. Okay, so it does this by making the lens less convex for distant vision and more convex for near vision. So let's go again to the convex structure. Less convex, that is to help with distant vision. More convex is going to help for near vision. Okay, so here we have the two. Let's first look at far vision. This is the one over here. We're going to look at far vision. So what is happening here is that when the object is more than 6 meters away, that is what we consider far. So if the object is more than 6 meters away, it is distant vision. So what is going to happen in this instance? We're going to have the ciliary muscles are going to relax. Okay, the sclera is pulled backwards. The suspensory ligaments become taut. Okay, so they're going to relax. The sclera is going to be pulled backwards. So if these, remember where the suspensory ligaments are. Let me just show you here. Sorry, where the ciliary muscle is. Can you see it's over here? And then, so when it's going to relax, this whole sclera is going to move back. Because remember, the ciliary muscle is a muscle. So when muscles contract, they become smaller. And when they relax, they become longer. Okay, especially the ciliary muscle here, because it's like a sort of like a triangular structure. You saw it there when you saw it in the internal structure. So now the sclera is going to move backward and the suspensory ligaments are going to become taut. Okay, so you can see there they become taut or tight. The tension on the lens is going to increase and the lens is going to become less convex. Okay, it's going to become less convex. The refraction power, so you can see it's thinner, but we don't use the word thinner because you know what, it looks like it's thinner here because we are looking at it in this dimension. Okay, but remember that it is actually a 3D object, so it is this biconvex shape, so we can say it becomes less convex. And the clear image is formed on the retina. When it comes to the object that is 6 meters away, here we are looking at the ciliary muscles contracting. So it's going to contract. So you can see it becomes larger in a way. Okay, because it's now going to, because of that structure the way it is, it's going to contract. Okay, and the suspensory ligaments are going to slacken. Okay, you can see there that they slacken, and that is going to decrease the tension of the lens. The lens is going to become more convex, okay, because now they're attached to this lens. The suspensory ligaments are going to slacken, the lens is going to become more convex, and then the refractive power of the lens increases, and the clear image is formed on the retina. Now let's just go through a few things where learners go wrong. They don't say the ligaments become taut or they slacken or they loosen. They use words like contract and relax. You cannot use that for ligaments, grade 12, because ligaments do not contract and they do not relax. Okay, so therefore we cannot say you cannot use those words. And then learners also want to say that it becomes convex or it does not become convex. We cannot say that. We have to say it becomes less or more convex because the original shape of the lens is convex. Okay, so I want us to think about these things, so because like I told you, it's like this triangular structure. So when it relaxes, it becomes elongated, and that's what caused the sclera to go backwards. And when it contracts, then it's obviously going to become a smaller version of this. That's why it looks larger, and it's contracting, and therefore it's going to move the sclera forward. And when the sclera is moving forward, the suspensory ligaments are going to slacken, and that's why the lens is going to become more convex. I hope you understand that now. I spent a lot of time on it because I must tell you, this is a very important question. They love to ask it. Examiners love to ask this question, and learners do not get all the marks that they can achieve here. Okay, so it's very important that you understand. Grade 12 life science is very much about understanding. The more you understand, the more you'll be able to remember. There is just too much to study in life sciences. So if you can understand, it's going to help you to remember. Okay, so this just shows us a different picture. It shows us about the lens and everything and how the rays is going to form. So here it shows us in a less convex lens how the rays are going to be refracted and then focus onto the retina. And here it's when there is a more convex, because it's a nearby object, how the light is going to be refracted onto the retina. Okay, now we move on to the pupillary mechanism, or the pupillary reflex. Yes, it is a reflex. You can see there's another lovely picture, and it's showing us how the pupil is getting bigger and smaller. So the iris is controlling the amount of light that enters the eye. The iris is the colored part of the eye, and it controls the size of the pupil because it's got circular and radial muscles. Okay, so let's have a look at this. Let's first look at the eye. You can see here from the actual picture of an eye and then a drawing. Here we have the radial muscles relax. Think of the radius of a circle. Okay, so we can look at it over here. Here we have, so if this is the diameter, the radius is this part, right? Remember that from maths. Okay, so that is your radial muscle. So they're the ones that are extending this way. And then we have our circular muscles, which are the ones that are going this way. Those are our circular muscles, okay? So here they're showing us that in bright light, when there is bright light, the radial muscles are going to relax. So all of these that are going this way, they are going to relax. Okay, in bright light, and this is going to cause the pupil to become smaller. So if you look at this picture, it says the radial muscles cause the iris relax, the circular muscles contract, and the pupil constricts. It becomes smaller. Okay, and then this is just showing us the sclera. So that's exactly what you're going to say. In bright light, the circular muscles of the iris contract, the radial muscles relax, the pupil constricts, and the amount of light entering the eye is reduced, or less light enters the eye. So if we have a look at this, where do learners go wrong? They don't mention the iris. You have to say the circular muscles of the iris. Why? Because there are circular muscles somewhere else. Maybe you need to be specific to explain or show the examiner that you understand that this is happening in the iris. So you can either say in the iris, the circular muscles contract, the radial muscles relax, or you can say the circular muscles of the iris contract, the radial muscles relax, the pupil constricts, and then you talk about the amount of light. Then this is a little mnemonic for learners that like to learn that way. It tells you what these all stand for. So they say the circular muscles contract, the radial muscles relax, the pupil constricts, and less light enters the eye. Okay, so you can see here we've covered everything of all the different types of ways that learners learn. Whether you're a visual learner, whether you do the mnemonics thing, whether you just be able to listen to what I'm saying, or whether you are able to read and then remember. So the opposite of this is dim light, the pupillary mechanism in dim light. And here you can see what's different is now the circular muscles are relaxing, the radial muscles are contracting, and when it does that, it causes the pupil to become larger, or it widens, it dilates, and then we have more light entering the eye. So in this instance, we have the circular muscles of the iris relax, the radial muscles contract, the pupil dilates, and the amount of light entering the eye is increased. And here we have a mnemonic for that. So grade 12, let's quickly just talk about this quickly. Why is this important? Why do we need the iris to control the amount of light that enters that enters the eye? Because in bright light, the light is bright, right? So there's going to be a lot of light that will be coming into the eye, and then it can damage the retina. Therefore, we have this mechanism there that it's a reflex that when we are in bright light, our pupil is going to automatically constrict. so that it allows less light to enter the eye to avoid damage or to prevent damage to the retina. Whereas in dim light, we want more light. Okay, when it's dim, there's not a lot of light around, so we need our pupil to dilate and become larger so that more light can be entering our eye so that we can see better. So that is the reason why we have the pupillary mechanism. Also, another very important question for the examination. Okay, please make sure that you know how to answer questions on this, because they like to ask it. And examiners ask you in funny ways. They won't just say, explain the pupillary mechanism in dim light. They might say, you are inside, you are it is very dark, or you're inside in a dimly lit room, and then you walk outside and it's a bright sunny day, and explain what will happen into your eye. In that instance, you need to tell us what is happening in bright vision. Not, okay, we started in the dim light and then we're moving to the bright light. No, you talk about what is happening when you are in the bright light. The same with accommodation. They're not just going to tell you, explain accommodation when there's an object that is less than 6 meters away. They're going to tell you, a grade 12 learner is reading a book, and they look up at their mom who's calling them. What is happening in the eye? So from here, we are going from near vision to distant vision, but you talk about the distant vision. Okay, I hope that is helpful. And this is just the differences between the pupillary mechanism and the accommodation, because learners confuse these ones. The parts involved, for me, it's very important to first know. For accommodation, it's the lens, the suspensory ligaments, the ciliary muscles. For the pupil, it is the iris, which has the circular and the radial muscles. In accommodation, what is the stimulus? It is the change in the distance of the object from the eye, and in pupillary mechanism, it's the change in light intensity. The main changes of accommodation: the shape of the lens, the pupillary mechanism, the diameter of the pupil. What brings about the change? The accommodation, the suspensory ligaments, and the ciliary muscles, because remember, the ciliary muscles are going to contract or relax, and that's going to cause the suspensory ligaments to slacken or become taut. And in the pupillary mechanism, it's the radial muscles that are going to contract or relax, and the circular muscles that are going to contract and relax, which is going to cause the size of the pupil to change. Right, now we're going to the last part of the content before we move on to what Sina is going to be doing with you on the different questions that you can get in this topic. So here we have the defects of the eye. Okay, Charles? This section is really underestimated by learners every year. And I must tell you that the examiners like this question. They do ask it, and they are asking it more often. And in life sciences, you really cannot afford to leave anything out. Okay, so let's really see that we can understand this. So we first have short-sightedness. This is called myopia. That's the proper scientific name for it, but we do accept short-sightedness if you want to use that. This is when people have problems seeing objects that are far away. So if you look at this picture here at the bottom, you can see they're taking a photo, and this person has short-sightedness. So they are able to see near, but they are not able to see the far away object. And in this instance, it's because the eyeball is too long, or the cornea is too curved for the length of the eyeball, or the inability of the lens to become more convex, and then light is focused in front of the retina. So there's three problems that can happen here. The eyeball is either too long, the cornea is too curved, or the inability of the lens to become more convex. Because remember, it must be able to change shape. Okay, so that is the problem here. So what happens is that the light comes in, it gets refracted, and then because the eyeball is too long and because of all of these issues, the image is going to fall here. And remember, if it falls anywhere else other than on the retina, it's a blurred image. Okay, so this is what happens to people. Now, how do we fix this? The treatment is that we need to use a concave lens to fix the problem. So what happens over here is light rays is refracted outwards to fall on the retina. So it has a concave lens. Can you see there it's concave? Okay, because now it's going this way. It's thinner on the inside and thicker on the outside. It's going to help the light rays to fall outwards. So you can see it's coming in through here. It's going to go this way, into the lens, and it's going to focus onto the retina. Okay, so short-sightedness, the treatment is a concave lens. Long-sightedness, this is problem seeing close objects. So you see it normally happens with people as they get older. You'll see as you're reading, you can check with your mom and your dad. As they're reading, they're now starting to do this, right? Just like this guy is doing over here, when they're trying to put the book or the newspaper far away from them to be able to see better. The distance between the lens and the retina is too small, or the eyeball is too short. Okay, so here we have a shortened eyeball, and the light is focused behind the retina. So you can see over here, the light is coming in, but it's focusing here behind the retina. It's harder for people to read as they age, and the lens loses elasticity. It cannot become convex enough, and it's corrected by glasses with a biconvex lens. So here we have a biconvex lens. So basically it's given you a shape of the lens, which our lens actually is. Okay, but this is like now an added spectacle, a spectacle with an added biconvex structure, so that the light is refracted inwards and then it's able to fall onto the retina. So it needs to refract it inwards to bring the rays forward, whereas the other one has to be outward to bring the rays backwards. Okay, so that is how you correct it, and you need to know those grade 12s. You need to know these two, and you need to know the treatment. They like to ask this. This is not where you talk about surgery, okay? You talk about the treatment with the convex or the concave lens. And then we've got astigmatism, which is another defect, but this one is different. This has got to do with the cornea or the lens, which is not equally rounded in all directions. Okay, so it's like it's got some unevenness going on. It leads to blurred vision, headaches, and squinting of eyes. The treatment is including spectacles, contact lenses, or laser therapy. That's what you need to know. You need to know what astigmatism is. You need to know how to treat it. Then you've got the last one, which are called cataracts, and this is basically when you have a clouding that forms in the lens due to the denaturing of lens proteins. It obstructs the passage of light, because remember we said the lens is transparent. It means it's see-through. But if it's forming this cloudiness in the eye, it's going to obstruct the light from going through. It's caused by age, chronic exposure to UV, or due to trauma. And it's fixed by surgery. The lens is actually removed and a synthetic lens is inserted. Okay, so that is what happens when we have a cataract. Okay, so you must be able to see that when you see a picture like this. Obviously in your exam it's going to be a black and white picture, but they can give you this, or in a biological term or whatever. The key word for here is the clouding of the lens. Okay, so just to recap quickly before we go to a break, we did the external structure of the eye, all the parts and the functions. We did the internal structure, all the parts and the functions. Then we did binocular vision. Then we covered accommodation. Please make sure that you know the parts that are involved in accommodation and pupillary mechanism and how they happen. And then we did the diseases of the eye. Okay, so we're going to have a quick break, and then I'm going to hand over to my co-presenter, Sina. Stay tuned and don't go anywhere.
Good day, grade 12 learners. My name is Sina Sekheche. Like my co-presenter has introduced me earlier, I will be taking you through the questions that are normally asked for this topic of the eye. Right, so we are going to have quite a number of activities that we are doing today. Some of them we will do them together, and some of them I will just give you some few minutes to go through the question, because it's very important for you to understand the question before you even attempt answering. So this is going to be our warm-up question. I hope you were listening to Vedika, because she told you everything that we are going to talk about in these questions. Right, so let us go through the first question. The first question says, which one of the following parts controls the amount of light entering the eye by influencing the size of the pupil? Right, I know sometimes when you read a question you get excited, you just want to think of the answer, and then you say amount entering the eye. Then you just think maybe the lens, but without even looking at what did the question actually ask for. No, it says by influencing the size of the pupil, meaning you must check what Vedika just told you. How is the pupil going to react, whether it's opening wide or whether it's opening slow? So which part helps in controlling that amount of light that is entering there? So the options that we have are the sclera. She told you about the sclera. Which part is the sclera? Does it have anything to do with influencing the amount of light? No. Then you have the cornea. You know which part of the eye is the cornea? Yes, and then you remember the cornea from the front. Going to the back is the sclera, the same layer. Then the retina. She spoke about the retina. You know retina there at the back. So you must know the parts of the eye like you know yourself. So when you come from the front to the back, you must know each and every part where it is situated like you were shown earlier. And then the iris. Now you think, which part is the iris? So out of all these four parts, which one can help to influence the amount of light that is going to enter the eye? So let us take a look at our answer. It is the iris. Now let's go back. It is the iris. So the iris, remember, they are those muscles that you find just before the lens, and because they are muscular, they are able to contract and relax, and when they contract with the muscles, that the radial muscles and the circular muscles, they are able to control the amount of light that is entering through that particular hole by making it bigger or making it smaller. So that is what you learned earlier. That is the iris. Then 1.2 for this 1.1.2 for this question, you need to read carefully and understand what is happening. Even if a question is a multiple choice question, please don't underestimate the question, because you know you can have higher order questions in multiple choice. So when you attempt to answer a question, just make sure that you read the stem of the question to your understanding. Right. A girl looking at a car moving away. So you need to find the key words so you can understand what is happening. So this car is moving away, meaning the distance is getting greater. It's not close. So from here, is able to focus on the letter on the number plate. I know for some of you, this is a dream. You wish to be able to focus on the letter on the number plates as a car is moving away. Because of the visual defects that you discussed also, some of you may not be able to do this. But in this case, this girl is able to do that. So let us check what is happening. Which one of the following changes occurred in her eyes? So as she was looking at this car that is moving away and being able to read the letter on the number plate, what changes were happening in her eye? So you can think of the parts that are involved when a person is looking at an object that is far away. So you must also think of what is happening to those parts. So let us take a look at these. The suspensory ligaments slackened. So we don't have the whole process, but just one thing that might have happened. So do you think the suspensory ligaments might have slackened? So, and what will be the effect of the suspensory ligaments slackening? Then you know your process, or the process of accommodation, to say, when we were told that the suspensory ligaments are slackening, what will be the effect thereof on the part that you want to talk about? Okay, so that one can be a possibility. Can it be? Can it not? You tell me. B, the ciliary muscles relaxed. Remember your parts. Where do you find the ciliary muscles? There on the parts of the iris. So you say those ciliary muscles are doing what? They are relaxing. What will be the effect thereof? You think of that, you bring it to your answer. Or the light rays were refracted more. You learned about the refractive power of the lens. So when the sky is moving away, are the light rays being refracted more? Something that you need to explore. The last one is the lens became more convex. Remember, you must, for you to be able to answer this question, you must know which parts plays a role in pupillary mechanism and which parts play a role in accommodation. So for this one, it's an accommodation question. Because the car is moving away, this lady is looking at the car from a far distance. And then far distance means what? You need your lens to become more convex. So the ciliary muscles are the ones that are going to relax. Remember, when the lens becomes more convex, what does that mean? It's something that is closer to you. It means you are looking at it very close. So here, the ciliary muscles, remember the ciliary muscles? In whatever that is happening as this lady is looking at this car, the ciliary muscles are therefore going to relax. And when they relax, what happens? This lady will be able to see an object that is far away. Right, let us move to the next question. Now for this question, I would like to give you 1 minute for you to go through all the parts. This is the strategy that you need to apply when you come across a life sciences question. First, when you see a question with a diagram like this, with the labels around, you see there are labels from A up to E, F. From A up to F, you must take your pencil, label all the diagrams without even going to the question first. So I would like to give you just 1 minute to go through the labels in your head as you discuss these labels with Vedika, and then we will look at the questions together. But for you, just label everything there. Right. So I will give you just 1 minute to do that. Right. So what you have just done now is to practice a very crucial skill in attempting any question that has a diagram in life sciences. So please do not forget you label. Labeling is quite important. So before you even go to the questions, you need to check what your labels are. So I hope you all have your labels from A up to F. Now let us look at the questions. It says the diagram below represents the structure of the human eye. So there is the structure of the human eye. From your labels, the ones that you have there, can you identify part C? So let us look at the diagram. What is part C? Part C is this layer here that is in the middle. You were told a lot of stuff or information about this layer that is in the middle. So what is that layer in the middle? It is the choroid. Remember, you were told the choroid, what it has, the structural suitabilities of the choroid. Can you remember them? How is the choroid? How can you differentiate the choroid from other layers there? It takes us to the second question. It says, give one function of part E. Part E. Now you come to part E. You see part E here. You've already labeled part E. Those things. What are those things? You must know first what they are before you can give the function. So part E is going to be your what? your ligaments, suspensory ligaments. So what are the functions of the suspensory ligaments? They hold the lens in position. So if you can see here on the diagram where I'm drawing in red, without these ligaments, the lens will be moving around. We will not know where the position of the lens is going to be. So their function there, they are placed in such a way that they are able to hold the lens in position. And also, they connect this lens, the part of the eye that is the lens, to the ciliary body. You are going to find your ciliary body somewhere here. So you see, they connect the lens to the ciliary body. Remember, they all play a role in accommodation, and it plays a role in accommodation because then it can change the convexity of the lens by doing what? By contracting and relaxing. So it plays a role in accommodation in that way. So that is the function of part E. Now, state why the clearest image will form when the light rays fall on part D. You've already labeled part D. So your part D is your retina. So why would a clear image form when light rays fall on this part? Right. Part D is the yellow spot. It has the highest concentration of the cones. So remember, this inner layer, all of this inner layer is your retina. And on the retina, you find your yellow spot concentrated with what? With cones. Here, you do not say rods and cones. Once you say rods and cones, it becomes wrong because the photoreceptors that are responsible for interpreting light and forming an image are the cones. So please be specific to say the cones, not the rods and cones. I know most of you want to say the rods and the cones, and then you get the answer incorrect because you included the rods as well. So please make sure that you write only the cones. Right. Explain one way in which part B. Now you go to part B. This is part B. Part B is the outermost layer. That has a different name when it goes to the front, and then when it goes to the back it has a different name. So explain one way in which part B is structurally different from part F. So where is F? Our F is our lens. Our part B is our sclera. So let's see. How are these two parts different? Part B, which is the sclera, you learned that it is opaque. Opaque in color. That is now the color that we can use to describe the color of the sclera. And therefore, because it is opaque, it does not allow light to pass through, because opaque means sort of like white, so it does not allow light to pass through. Whereas part F, which is the lens, is transparent. Remember, you learned that the lens is transparent. You need it to be transparent because therefore it is going to allow light to pass through into the eye. But imagine if part F was opaque, then the light will not pass through, and there is a disease that is like that makes the eye not to be very clear, or the lens not to be very clear, and therefore light cannot pass through. Right. Then going to the second differentiation is that part B, which is the sclera, is non-elastic. So it cannot stretch, it cannot accommodate anything because its other function is to maintain the shape of the eye. So it is rigid, it is not elastic. However, part F, which is our lens, is elastic. Why is it elastic? Because it is going to enable the shape to change, or it is going to allow the lens to change its shape. So hence it is elastic. Imagine if it was rigid like the sclera, it will not be able to change its convexity to being more convex or less convex. So you need it to be able to be elastic to allow that movement to happen. So that is your lens. So those are the two differences, and this is a question that can appear also in the examinations. Be ready to answer these questions. So meaning, what you can take from this activity is you need to know your parts, You need to know the structural suitabilities and the functions. So you can have yourself a table where you have the part, the structural suitability, and the function. So you'll be able to answer this question with ease. Then we move to the next question. The next question, I'm not going to give you much time because we don't have many labels like the one that we have first, where you are going to label your parts. So you will look at part A. I want you to take your time and look at what is part A, where is part A. On the retina, there is a part that is also like a spot that is like dented. There are two, but this one is now towards where the optic nerve is going to leave. And then you have the outermost layer there at D. And then you have B here. This is our lens, what we were always talking about. And then C here is that front part. That is the covering of the eye, the outermost covering, which is your cornea. And then you are given a free answer there of the iris to show you that those muscles that are facing up and down like this, they are your iris. So you have quite a number of labels you have studied. You can go ahead and label others that are not even there, but don't waste your time. So we go to the questions. The diagram alongside represents the structure of the human eye. Identify part A, C, and D. So do you see, by studying the question, by studying the diagram first, you already have answers for A, B, and C. So what is A? Part A, you have your part A, that will be your blind spot. So let us look at part A. So this is the part A. Then you have part B, which is your cornea. And then C, which is your, C is your cornea at B. Yeah, you see what is happening now with the labels and the letters. Look at what is happening. At number B, you are supposed to label C. So what is C? C is your cornea. And then at number C, you're supposed to label D. What is D? D is your sclera. Right. So those are just the parts. Please make sure that you collect marks there. Whenever you are given a diagram, there will be questions that is asking you about parts. Those are supposed to be free marks for a life sciences learner. Then you come to question number 1.2. Now, this question now is where you need to read with understanding. Describe how the muscles in the iris, so here, this is our iris, enable a person to see in dim light. You just learned from Vedika now that you need your eye to protect the retina. You need the iris to protect the retina or to control the amount of light that is entering the eye so that the retina is protected. Now, in dim light, the iris acts differently. You need more light coming in. If you can get that first statement coming in, correct that. In dim light, you need more light coming in. So for more light to come in, if you want more light to come in through the house, what do? You open the windows, you open the door. So even with the eye, that is what is going to happen. So let us take a look at how you're going to answer this question. First, you're going to tell us that the radial muscles of what? Remember, they were asking you how the pupil acts when the person is looking in dim light. The radial muscles of the iris, very important to mention, because there are radial muscles of everything somewhere down in your body. So you need to explain that. Here I'm talking about the eye, and which part of the eye? The iris. So the radial muscles of the iris are going to contract. And Vedika showed you a very nice diagram which shows you which muscles are the radial muscles and which muscles are the secular muscles. So the radial ones, the ones that are going like this diagonally, are going to contract. Remember even that mnemonic? And then the secular muscles of the iris, you see, still mention of the iris, are going to relax. So the secular ones are going to relax. Already you have 2 marks. When this happens, the pupil, remember the pupil is now that space between the iris. The pupil is going to dilate or to widen. This is where now you are opening for more light to come in. So it's going to dilate. And when it dilates, what does that mean? it allows more light to enter the eye. Then you have your 4 marks. So remember how to answer pupillary mechanism for dim light. Use your mnemonic system. How to answer pupillary mechanism for bright light. Also use your mnemonic system. Right. Then we come to the next question. Name the process that occurs in the eye when a person focuses on an object at different distances. So here when a person focuses on objects at near or far, it does not specify. So what is the name of that particular process? I think we all know that is accommodation. Then we go to the next question. Explain how the shape of part B. Now, remember, you have to relate everything to the structure or the diagram that you are given. Explain how the shape of part B, you go look at part B. Okay, part B is our lens. Enables a person to read a book. I also remember Vedika mentioning to you that they will not ask you in the exam question paper to say, explain accommodation for near distance or for far. They will give you a scenario. So you must use your brain to think. If a person is reading a book, how far is the book from the person's face or from the person's eye? It means it is near, because you cannot read a book that is there, over there, 6 meters away from you. So you must use your brain to analyze, to say, here they're saying, okay, this person is reading a book. It means the book is in front of them. This is near vision. So how would you explain that? You need to tell us that part B, which is the lens. So you can get for saying part B if you don't know what part B is, or you can mention that it is the lens. It is more convex. So when the person is reading at a book that is closed, the lens is going to be more convex. And when it is more convex, the light rays are refracted more. So they are refracted more. When they are refracted more, they focus that light on the retina. So this is the light rays, not the light rays, the lens is more convex and it refracts the light rays so that they reach the retina and to form a clear image on the retina. If this person was looking at something that is far, this is how you need to remember it. If you are looking at something that is far, your lens is going to stretch. It's going to stretch in such a way that it wants to accommodate that much light so that it stretches to reach the retina as well. So when the object is close, you must check this. Your lens is always more convex, but when it is far, your lens is going to be less convex. That is how you must remember those. And then you say when it is more convex, it has the more refractive power, or it is going to reflect the light rays so that they focus on the retina. So that is how you are going to approach this question. Now you see in this one question, you were asked about 2 processes that you did when you studied the eye, which is pupillary mechanism and accommodation. However, what you need to learn is whether they are asking about pupillary mechanism in dim light or bright light, you need to know the opposite for both. Because the question can come, another question can come and ask you about bright light. So if you are able to answer in dim light, you will be able to answer also in bright light. If you are able to answer for an object that is viewed from a close or near vision, you must also be able to answer for an object that is from a distance or far distance. So please make sure that you know those 2 processes and you use the mnemonics that you were given to study them and also to answer the questions for you to collect 4 marks. It is mostly 4 marks that you can collect from each of those questions. So please use the mnemonics to study if you are not able to follow through. Right, then we come to question number 4. Question number 4, let us look at it together. It says, the graph alongside shows the results of an investigation done to determine the effect of light intensity on the size of the pupil. Now, already when you are talking about the pupil, you're talking about the eye. You know they're talking about pupillary mechanism. You take that in to say, okay, here they want to see if they put so much light, or if you are far away from the light, how is your pupil going to react? Is it going to be more? Is it going to open wider, or is it going to become small? You try to understand an investigation, try to understand what they are doing. Then you'll be able to answer the questions. Then you look at the graph, because they told you that the graph alongside speaks to that. Then you see, okay, at distance 1, the size of the pupil was about, at distance about 1 centimeters, the size of the pupil was about 1 millimeters. Okay, then you try to check the next one. Now, as the distance increases, it goes further. It is now 2, and the size of the pupil also widened. Meaning, what does this mean? You must also check, because some of you might even make a mistake of thinking that this is light increasing. It is not light increasing. You are increasing the distance, meaning you are moving further away from the light. So if you are moving further away from the light, it means you are going to like darker. So the light is not getting more. It is the distance that is getting more. So you need to understand that. So as you are moving further away from the light, what is happening to the pupil? You see, okay, at 3, it is 4. At 4, it is about 4.5, and then at 5 it is 5. So what is happening? Those of you who are doing physical sciences will tell us about the directly proportional. Remember, in life sciences, we want you to explain. We want it to be more descriptive, to say, when this happened, this happens. We want to trace the cause and effect. So we don't want you to just give us that this is the distance versus the size people or what. We want descriptions that we can follow. Right. Now, which one of the following statements is a conclusion that can be made from the results? So this were just the results that were given. So what can we conclude from this? Can we say, A, as the distance from the light source increases, the size of the pupil also increases? Probably. Remember how you answer a multiple choice question. And sometimes, yes, it can trick you. You find yourself, but you don't just go straight to the first option, even if it sounds right or it makes sense to you. You consider other options, and then you eliminate the 2 that are the most incorrect, and you are left with 2 that might probably be the same, and then you choose the best one out of those. So there is also a 50-50, but there's a 25% chance for you to get the answer correct. So please, you do not even leave the multiple choice questions in the examinations, because if you leave it, it's like you are choosing 0% out of 25%. So please make sure that this is a question that you are going to answer. So for now, A, we can put it on hold if it makes sense to us. Then we come to B. As the distance from the light source decreases, so now we are bringing it down, the size of the pupil increases. Is that the case for this graph? Because we are talking about distance that is increasing, we cannot consider distance that is decreasing. So this one can be completely out. Then the size C, as the size of the pupil increases, yes, we have that, the distance from the light source increases. Is that how you must say it? In the way of determining the cause and effect. Okay, maybe you can put it on hold. Then you go to D. As the size of the pupil decreases, remember we said our graph is not telling us anything about decreasing, so we cannot even consider it. Distance from the light increases, so we cannot consider that one. So we are left with A and C. So let us check. As the distance from the light source increases, here, this is the distance increasing from the light source, the size of the pupil also increases. Now look at what is happening to the size of the pupil. It is increasing, going up. So it means we can accept A as our answer. So you must see that answer in your graph. So if you don't see it in your graph, then you cannot choose it. So do you see how you attempt a multiple choice question? Then you come to and also being able to interpret graphs. It's a skill that is required in life sciences. You need to be able to take information from the graph and be able to interpret it and use it for your answers. Right, then we come to the next question. Now, you've learned also about the eye defects. There are so many things that can go wrong with the eye. You have done 4, I'd say 2 diseases and 2 defects of the eye. So let us take a look at this one. The diagram alongside represents a type of visual defect. So you see, if you were listening carefully, if the light does not focus on the retina here, it is already a problem. If it is not focusing on the yellow spot there, it is already a problem that needs to be fixed. So you see, that is why we say this is a visual defect. So then you check whether the light falls before the retina or after the retina. Then you can tell which disease is that. Right. Then you go through your labels like we always do. Study the diagram. Before you even attempt the questions, you study the diagram, check what is your A, what is your B, what is C, you already see, what is D, what is E, what is F, what is G. Already you have your labels there. The eye makes sense. If you are struggling to learn the parts of the eye, start from the outermost layer going into the inside. And you also learned about the fluid mediums that are found in this part here, which is going to be your aqueous humor. A, the first letter A, then the first fluid will be aqueous humor, and then the last one will be your vitreous humor. So you must also remember those, and also your optic nerve, taking these to the nervous system where everything is going to be interpreted. Right. Then we come to the questions. 3.1.1, identify part F. You come to say, okay, what is part F? Part F looks like the outermost layer, because there is part B there. Part B might be the middle layer, you see? So, and then state one function of part B. I want to do 3.1.1 and 3.1.2 together. Function of part B. So you see, part F and part B, these are the parts. F and B, so what are they? F is going to be our sclera. Why? Because it is the outermost layer. You see, remember I said it looks like it is the outermost layer. And then your part B is going to be what? Your choroid. What is the choroid? It is darker. Look at your diagrams. Most of the time when they give you a diagram of the eye, the middle layer is going to be darker. And there's a reason for that. You were given the structural suitabilities of the choroid. This is a layer of pigments that absorb the light rays. So it has pigments. So pigments gives what? Color. So hence it is darker than the other layers. So your choroid has those pigments that are going to do what? To absorb the light rays, because you don't want internal reflections of the light in the eyes. Or also, you can say it's darker because it has blood vessels. It is richly supplied with blood vessels that are going to provide the eye with oxygen or with nutrients. Remember, each and every part in our body requires oxygen, it requires nutrients to keep its structure, to sustain its elasticity, to do all these functions. We get all those from the nutrients that we get in our bloodstream. So in the eye, the part that is going to supply the entire eye with those nutrients or with oxygen is your choroid. So I think now the choroid makes sense. Then we go to 1.3. 3.1.3. Explain why the light rays must focus on part D. So you see part D here. Here. That is where the light rays must focus, rather than on part E. Now on part E, here, you see part E. Part D and part E, you find them on the retina, which is the innermost layer. But remember, we spoke about what the other one is responsible for, because the other one has rods, it has cones with, those are the photoreceptors that are going to do what? To absorb light and interpret light and form an image. However, the other one does not. So your E is your blind spot. So let us check it. Part D is going to be your yellow spot or the macchia lutea for those of you level 7 learners, but just stick to yellow spot. The yellow spot, which contains the photoreceptors that are mainly cones. So even if you say photoreceptors, you are still going to get a mark, but mainly cones. But please, I know some textbooks or some old question papers might have rods and cones. Just write the cones. So we say part D has photoreceptors, which are mainly cones. Therefore, the clearest image are going to form there on the yellow spot. Because of what? Because of the cones, if light falls on that part. So that is why we want light to fall on that part. We want light to fall on that part because it is the part that has the photoreceptors, and it is the part that is going to allow the eye to form the image when that light falls on it. However, if light falls on part E, which is the blind spot, let us look at part E. I want us to go back to part E. Can we please go back? Right. Part E is here. Here is our part E. Part E is our blind spot. So on the blind spot, can we form an image? Do you see the blind spot is already leading to what? To the nerves. To the nerves, the optic nerve that is leaving the eye. Then part E is the blind spot and it has no photoreceptors. So the first one, the yellow spot, has photoreceptors. Part E does not have photoreceptors. Rods and cones, and this is where the optic nerve leaves the eyeball. So do you see that part? The blind spot is where now the optic nerve leaves the eye. Therefore, no image can form there if light falls on that part. Because light, if it falls on the part that has the cones, that is where now it's going to form an image. But on this part, which is the blind spot, there are no photoreceptors, there are no cones. So if light falls on that part, an image cannot be formed because this is the part that is leading to the optic nerve. Right. Then we go back. 3.1.5. Oh, 3.1.4. Name the type of lens. Name the type of lens that is used to correct the visual defect shown in the diagram. You studied with Veriga. The lens, the light rays here, they are just reaching up to the middle. They are not going further into the retina to reach the yellow spot. So that is a problem. You need a lens that is going to correct this and refract the light in such a way that is going to make them stretch even further to reach that retina or that yellow spot on the retina. So what type of lens are you going to use there? You learned so much about that today. You are going to use a biconcave lens. She said it's the lens that is the same shape as our own natural lens. So you need spectacles or glasses that have that kind of lens that is going to increase the refractive power of the light rays and make sure that they do not fall in the middle or on the vitreous humor, that they fall where? On the retina, on the yellow spot. So to correct that type of defect of visual defect, you need biconcave lens. Right. Biconcave lenses will help to diverge the light before it enters the eye to focus the light rays on the retina. So that is why you need a biconcave one. No, a biconcave one is the one that is slim in the middle. The one that is slimmer in the middle, not the one that is thick in the middle. Please correct that. And that is a mistake that we can make also with convex and concave. Remember what she said, convex, concave. Okay, we can say concave, like a cave, ne? Coming in. Remember, you go into the cave, coming in. So here you say it has a curve that is coming in. And then convex, outside, like the one that is thick now on the middle. So for that procedure, you need a biconcave, the one that has a cave that goes in. Ne? Please make sure that you are able to differentiate between those two types of lenses. Right. And then 3.1.6. Explain one way in which part C is structurally suited for accommodation. So what is part C? Part C is our lens. Okay, let us look at it from here. The lens, remember we said it is transparent, number one. And for it to play a role in accommodation, right, transparent is for it to play a role in what? Allowing light to pass through. But for accommodation, you need it to be elastic. So it is elastic, allowing its shape to change from being convex or to being more, to change its convexity to being more convex or less convex. So that structural suitability allows it to play a role in accommodation, because if the lens was not elastic, it was not going to be able to accommodate the light or increase the refractive power for the light to focus on the retina. So you need it to be like that. Now, name the two muscles found in part G. This is our part G. This is your iris. Part G is the iris. So what muscles do you find there? Remember, you spoke about the radial muscles and the circular muscles, and they play a role in pupillary mechanisms. As the other one contracts, the other one relaxes. So they work antagonistically, so to open the size of the pupil for light to come through, whether in dim light or in bright light. Right, now name and describe a visual defect that occurs when part A is uneven. Let us look at part A. Part A is this front part. So you were told that sometimes part A may be uneven. So when it is uneven, it leads to what type of a defect? That is astigmatism. So it can be sometimes the cornea, or it can be the lens itself. So when there is unevenness on the cornea itself, then it leads to astigmatism. Then how can you correct it? You correct it by having a lens that is uneven like it's so, but so to make up for the unevenness. So if there's a part of the cornea that goes inwards, then you're going to have a lens that goes outwards on that part, just to make up for the unevenness of that particular part. Right. Then we can look at this activity also on defects. We are going to look at this activity together. The table below indicates the percentage of visually impaired people in the world suffering from different visual defects. So these are all the visual defects that you studied today. Says 2% of people are suffering from blindness, 64% are suffering from long-sightedness, and short-sightedness, there are 30% of people that are suffering from it, and the other visual defects that are not mentioned, 4% of people are suffering from that. Now, this is the skill also to be able to interpret the table, to read the information in the table, and these are free marks. Please make sure that you collect these. Like the first question, which visual defect in the table is the most common among the world population? Now, if it says the most common, so you go to your table and look for the one that has the highest percentage. So which one is that? That is your long-sightedness. This one is a free mark, it's a given. Now, in some cases where people are blind, the condition is caused by cataracts. So cataract is one of the diseases that you also covered. So what is cataract? Is characterized by what? So here you need to apply your knowledge of what you learned earlier. So cataracts has explain why people with cataracts may become blind. So which disease is cataracts? What is it characterized by? This is the disease where the lens become opaque. Remember opaque, we spoke about this word earlier when we were talking about the sclera. So here, if the lens becomes opaque, it means it is cloudy or milky. Therefore, it does not allow light to pass through. Vedika told you about this, that you need the lens to be as transparent as possible for it to be able to perform its function to allow light to pass through. So if a person's lens is opaque, it will not allow light to pass through, and we call that disease cataracts. So it may lead to blindness if it becomes more and more and more cloudy until the light does not even go through to reach the retina. And then an image will not be formed. The person will not see eventually. Now, state one way in which cataracts can be treated. Right, cataracts, for you to treat cataracts, you must perform surgery to remove that layer that is opaque so that to open the lens to be clear and transparent again to allow light to pass through. Right, then we can continue with the same activity. The table below indicates the percentage of visually impaired people in the world suffering from defects. So we've studied those, we know which one is which. Now explain why long-sighted people need to wear glasses with biconvex lens as a corrective measure. Why do they need to wear glasses with biconvex? Here's the word that is coming again. You see, I'm underlining the word. I'm underlining the word so we can remember the terminology again to say convex, biconvex, convex this side, convex this side, biconvex. So why do people with long-sightedness need that type of lens to correct their problem? The lens is less convex, meaning their own problem is that the lens is less convex, or sometimes the eyeball is too short or the cornea is flat. So these people have a problem. That problem, it causes the light rays to fall behind the retina. So it is going to fall behind the retina. And remember, for an image to form, the light rays must fall where? On the retina. So if it falls behind the retina, behind the retina, then you know that the image is not going to be formed. So you need something that is going to do what? To refract or to shorten the light rays to bring them to fall on the retina. Therefore, a biconvex lens increases the refractive power of the light rays and it focuses them on the retina to form a clear picture. So that is why these people need a biconvex lens, because the more it is biconvex, the refractive power of the light is going to be increased and therefore it's going to fall on the retina. So you correct that with a biconvex lens for this reason. Number 4, name a visual defect that is characterized by an uneven cornea or a lens. So we've already spoken about it on the previous activity. So that will be your astigmatism. Right. Then activity 7, which is a very short activity. This is just for you to remember the visual defects that you've studied and how can we correct them. State how the following defects can be treated to improve vision. So meaning you understand what is long-sightedness, what is astigmatism, what are cataracts, and what is short-sightedness. So for long-sightedness, what do you need? You need to wear spectacles or contact lenses with convex lenses. We've just spoken about that now on the previous activity. Convex, you need the ones that are thick, convex, because the light is falling behind the retina. Or you can do laser surgery to reshape the cornea. Please don't just be lazy to go to surgery when you are answering the questions. Although you can score some marks if you don't know the answer. But think of the lens that is used to correct that particular. Think of the correction first. Then astigmatism, you can also wear the spectacles with unevenly ground lenses. Remember, why is it uneven? Because already the person who's suffering from astigmatism, their cornea or their lens has some unevenness in them. So you bring a lens that is going to compensate for where it is going in or outwards, or so you give an uneven lens as well to compensate for the uneven cornea. Or you can do surgery. Cataracts, you remove the cataracts, or you can replace the lens altogether. For short-sightedness, now people can wear spectacles or contact lenses with concave lenses. For these two, please make sure that you know which one is which. Find a way to remember. For long-sightedness, concave. For short-sightedness, convex. For short-sightedness, concave. So, or you can use laser surgery to reshape. Now, which one of the following combination is correct for a visual defect of the eye? This is just the last question, a take home bonus for you. Visual defect, astigmatism, has an irregular shaped cornea. You can use corrective lenses for that. So we can use, this is the correct one, this is the correct combination. Remember, you look at it across, not just one. Then for your homework, you have an activity taken from previous question papers. Make sure that you answer these activities on your own, and your teacher is going to check this activity and mark the activities. If you have questions or you have some places where you do not understand, please ask your teacher. Make sure that you get the answer, because these are typical exam questions that you might get. So for your homework, please attempt this question and ask where you do not understand. Then we are going to meet again next time on Pocket School. Please log in on the 22nd of May, where you will be studying the human ear. Please, 2:30, we expect to see you there. It will be lovely to have you, to give you all those tips for the ear. Right, thank you so much until we meet again next week.